Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Charli XCX Charli. This is a pop record that I was looking forward to quite a bit, considering it's going to be the first studio album that Charli has released under this newer sound of hers, this kind of experimental pop sound. Now, of course, she has dropped several mixtapes, an EP, and a slew of singles, kind of toying around with this sound. However, like I said before, this is technically her first full-length studio album with a sound like this, and I was kind of interested to see what she was going to do on this project because of it. Was this going to be a culmination of what she's been playing around with sonically for the past few years or so? Was it going to live up to that hype in that regard? And the answer to that question is, for the most part, yes. I do think that this album does live up to the expectations I had coming into it, and I do think that for the most part that it does act in a sense as a culmination of all these styles and sounds that she's played around with on her past couple of mixtapes and EPs and singles and things like that. I think it serves that purpose decently enough. Throughout this project, a lot of the instrumentals maintain this very fun, bouncy, bold sound to them that I really enjoy. They just sound very playful and energetic in a way that's just really captivating to me. They get stuck in my head very easily, and all the instrumentals here on this thing, for the most part, have a ton of personality and really jump out to me when I listen to them. Not only that, but I do think that Charli's vocal performances here on this project are really great, and also add a ton of personality to these tracks too. And not only that, but a slew of featured artists that pop up on this project also provide a lot of different character and personality to the tracks that they pop up on respectively. There is a good amount of features on this project. However, I never really got the impression listening to this thing that they were ever too overbearing or anything quite like that for the most part. On every track that has a feature of some kind, I think they have a lot of good chemistry with Charli, and I think they add something new to the song that she wouldn't have been able to accomplish otherwise. I feel like the start to this project is one that is particularly strong, kicking off with the song Next Level Charli, which is one of the shorter cuts on this thing. It definitely feels like an opener cut on this record, not necessarily in the sense that it's not really fully developed on its own, and that's just building up to the next song or anything quite like that. It certainly is its own thing, and I think it accomplishes its own thing really nicely, but I think that, lyrically, trying to kind of be this anthem for her fan base, things of that sort, just having her on this track alone, giving a really strong performance, and having this song just really embody a lot of these sounds that you're going to hear on this record, more generally speaking. I think this song makes for a really solid opener to this record. Essentially, I think if you were to just listen to this one track alone, and you like it, you'll probably like the majority of what else pops up here on this project. I think that this song does a good job of signaling what's going to come later on in this record in that regard. The next song on the record, Gone, I feel like is definitely one of the strongest cuts on this thing, featuring a very memorable chorus to it, and a feature from Christine and the Queens, an artist I wasn't familiar with prior to this song, but I really like what this artist added to this song here. I think that she has good chemistry with Charli, and overall this just makes her one of the highlights in the track listing. The next song on the record, Cross You Out, that happens to feature Sky Ferreira on it, is another one of the highlights here in the track listing, in my opinion. I think Sky has some great chemistry with Charli, and I think her vocals here on this track sound fantastic as well. Just another really standout hook on this thing too, and that is something I should probably say is the case for a lot of the songs on this record. A lot of the hooks on this thing are really massive, really bold, and really catchy too. The track 1999 featuring Troye Sivan is one that I've seen as kind of one of the more disliked cuts on this record, just generally online, but I don't really understand why necessarily, because sonically I don't think this song is all too different from the majority of the other songs on this record. The instrumental to this cut is still really bouncy, really upbeat, and really fun. I think the vocal performances on this track from both Charli and Troye are really solid, and lyrically this track is talking about kind of wanting to be back in 1999 in the case of the two artists on this track when they were both very young children, kind of reminiscing about being really young and just being able to, I guess, engage with pop culture and things of that sort at the time without really having to deal with, real life problems, things like that. Believe me, I get it. I was only around for like 4 months of 1999. Those were probably some of the more solid 4 months of my life because I didn't have to worry about any of this, adult crap that I have to deal with now. So overall, I think 1999 is a pretty fun cut on this thing. Not one of my favorites on the record or anything quite like that, but I still don't really get the hate for this track by any means. Another one of the kind of odder cuts on here that I've seen some pretty split opinions on is the track Blame It On Your Love featuring Lizzo, which is a cut that most people might remember from her Pop 2 mixtape that was originally released under the title track 10. However, this is a different version of the same song, I guess you could say. A lot of the vocal performances from Charli here are similar. However, the instrumental to this track and just the general tone of this thing is completely different, of course, in addition to the Lizzo feature here, which also wasn't on the original song we got back in 2017. This version of the track is, as I said before, a lot more upbeat. It's a lot happier sounding, even if the lyrics here still remain the same. The original version of this track was one that was pretty spacey, very somber in tone. I should mention it is probably one of my favorite Charli XCX songs, probably my favorite song from that mixtape as well. So hearing this newer version of it here on this project was certainly interesting to say the least. But I actually think that this new version of the track is also pretty enjoyable. I don't think I like it quite as much as the version from Pop 2, but I still think this version is a pretty fun track. I think the instrumental here is really fun and bouncy, like a lot of the other instrumentals on this album. I think it just has a ton of personality to it. I think Charli's vocal performance here is still really solid as well. I think the hook to this track is still immensely catchy. Lizzo's feature here is kind of short. I wish maybe there was a bit more to it to help flesh the track out a bit more, but what we get of it is still pretty solid, I will say. And overall, this song is just another, really solid cut on this record. Again, I don't think it's necessarily better than the track 10 version of this song, but it's still really enjoyable. If you do happen to be one of those people out there that does kind of miss the tone and sound of the original version of that song, however, there certainly are some other cuts on this record, I feel, that will scratch that same itch for you, even if they aren't the exact same song, if you know what I mean. Probably one of the biggest examples of that is the closing track to this record, 2099, that also features Troye Sivan on it. I think this track maintains a kind of similar, spacey, kind of somber tone to it to end off the record, much like track 10 did to Pop 2. I can certainly draw some parallels between the two tracks, but at the same time, both songs are certainly their own things as well. I'd even say tracks like February 2017, or even Warm to some extent, fill a similar role as being more atmospheric, spacier cuts on this thing, though of course their own respective features definitely add some extra different personality to these tracks as well. While I do enjoy the majority of the aspects of this record, I do have some small complaints with this thing. Probably one of those being that outside of the very start and the very end of this record, which I think are really well put together, I think the ordering of the track list in the rest of the project is kind of random seeming at times. Like, for example, I think the start of the record, as I said before, is great, and some of the tracks immediately following the beginning are pretty solid too and keep up a pretty good momentum going. However, we start getting towards the end of the record, you have some tracks in a row where it's just Charli by herself performing, and these tracks are pretty good in their own right. I think they're solid tracks, but after track after track after track of these songs that at times are probably some of the most similar on the entire project, it could start to seem maybe a little bit stale, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because I think if the track listing was rearranged slightly to include some of the different sounding cuts from earlier in the record, to maybe split these songs up a bit more, the record would maybe sound a bit more engaging and a bit more dynamic, instead of maybe throwing all of its punches in like the first half or so and then kind of dying off a bit before the very end. Another kind of small problem I have with this project is that while I do enjoy the track Shake It a fair bit, I think the fact that Charli kind of seems like a feature on her own song on this thing is a little bit disappointing. She only does the hook here on this track, pretty much, and while it's a pretty decent hook, and while I think all the featured artists on this thing doing the verses do a really good job with their own respective parts, and that they bring a lot of character and personality to their performances, again, I feel like it's kind of disappointing that Charli just kind of feels like an afterthought in this song on her own album. I mean, there's not really an artist in particular here that dominates the song, so much so that I would say that this song is probably more so their song than Charli's, but if there's any artist here that is in that position of dominating the track, I certainly wouldn't say that it's Charli in this position because, like I said, her contributions to this track seem the smallest out of everyone here. I still do enjoy the track, though I do want to reiterate that despite some of my minor complaints with it. And the same could be said really for this album as a whole. Despite some of my minor complaints with this thing, I still do think that Charli is a really good album. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that it's a pretty great album. And really, in terms of its goal of going out to essentially make a studio album version of a lot of these sounds and ideas that Charli's been playing around with in the past few years on mixtapes and EPs and singles and things like that, I think it accomplishes that goal pretty nicely. It really does just kind of take those sounds and refines them into the album format. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's taking these sounds into super new places or even necessarily raising it to its greatest and highest point either. I would more so say that a lot of the ideas and sounds she's played around with are, once again, being more so refined into your more typical album package, because a lot of the music on this thing still kind of maintains that slightly experimental edge to it, but is still pretty accessible and fun and poppy as well. Overall, though, Charli is a pretty great pop record and one that you should definitely check out if this kind of music is your thing, or if you're just looking for something really fun and catchy to listen to. But yeah, that really sums up my thoughts on this project in full. It is just my own personal opinion on this thing, though, so if you happen to disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to leave your own thoughts on this album in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you also leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content. Things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. Thank you guys for watching once again, and stay golden.